Hello. In this week's Torah portion, Tetzaveh, we first hear about the mysterious Urim and Tummim. Quote, inside the breastplate of decision of the high priest, you shall place the Urim and Tummim, so that they are over Aaron's heart when he comes before the Lord. Thus Aaron shall carry the instrument of decision for the Israelites over his heart before the Lord at all times. Unquote. Later in the Torah, when God tells Moses to turn leadership over to Joshua, God informs him that God's way of communicating with Joshua will not be as direct as it was with Moses, but through the Urim and Tummim. Quote, Joshua shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who will on his behalf seek the decision of the Urim before the Lord. By such instruction they shall go out, and by such instruction they shall come in, he and all the Israelites, the whole community. Unquote. The Bible tells us that after Moses, the means of communication with God were only dreams, prophets, and the Urim and Tummim. Quote, and Saul inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him, either by means of the Urim or by the prophets. Unquote. In Talmudic times, a bat kol, a voice from heaven, was sometimes heard. For example, it told the rabbis to rule in favor of the opinions of Hillel instead of those of Shammai. It also told them to side with Rabbi Eliezer, but was overruled on the grounds that rabbis, not gods, must interpret the Torah. Was God's purpose to reduce dependence on him? What were the Urim and Tummim? The Torah speaks as if we know what they are and how they work. It was probably an oral tradition. What are they exactly, and what exactly is their function? They were an oracle. They revealed God's answers to questions. This is why the breastplate is called in our verse the breastplate of decision, Hoshen HaMishpat. On the breastplate was a pouch with 12 gemstones in 4 rows of 3, on which the names of the 12 tribes were engraved. In the pouch were the actual Urim and Tummim, which Rashi says were an inscription bearing the name of gods. How did they work? There is some uncertainty. The Talmud tells us, Rabbi Yochanan says the letters forming the answer protrude, then the priest combines them into words. Resh Lakish says, no, the letters rearrange themselves and join to form words, unquote. Others, including Josephus, say that rays of light shone on the letters. The Rambam partly confirms this and describes them as the handiwork of heaven and the secret handed to Moses from the mouth of the Almighty. The Talmud notes that some Hebrew letters are missing. Quote, Tzadi is not in the names of the 12 tribes. Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzhak said, the names Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were also written there, and Isaac, Yitzhak, has a Tzadi. But Tetz was not there either. Rabbi Ahab Bar Yaakov said, Shiftei Yeshurun, the tribes of Yeshurun, were also written there. Shiftei has a Tetz. Yeshurun is another biblical name for Israel. Rabbi Emmanuel Cohen notes that Tetz could have been included by adding the simple word Tov, good. So why was Shiftei Yeshurun, the tribes of Israel, was added? It was to teach us that the 12 tribes of Israel were not only 12 entities, but also one whole. The answers were always yes or no, except in 2 recorded cases. Rashi says it was called the breastplate of judgment because its statements are always clear and definite. The Bible reports an attempt to identify a sinner by repeatedly splitting the people into 2 groups and asking the Urim which group contained the sinner. The Urim were also used to divide the land of Israel among the tribes, in a process described in the Talmud. They were also used by the prophet Samuel to select Saul as first king of Israel. Who was allowed to use them? The Torah says, quote, by such instruction they shall go out, and by such instruction they shall come in, he and all the Israelites, the whole community. The Mishnah interprets this to mean that the consultation of the oracle was only for high-level leaders and for the benefit of the whole community, not for individual advice. Quote, the high priest may be consulted for the decision of the Urim and Tummim only on behalf of the king, or the president of the court, or a person needed by the whole community. Why are they called that? The Talmud answers, quote, Urim, based on the word or, meaning light, is so called because it illuminates and explains its words. Tummim, based on the word tam, meaning completed, is because it fulfills its words, which always come true. Did they always work? The Talmud implies that they did with a proper interpretation. Quote, and if you say in the battles following the incidents of Gibeah of Benjamin, why did the Urim and Tummim not fulfill its words? They consulted the Urim and Tummim 3 times about whether to attack the tribe of Benjamin, and each time they were told yes. However, the first 2 times they were defeated, and only on the 3rd time did they succeed. The answer is that the first 2 times they did not ask whether they would succeed or not, but only how and whether they should fight. If they had asked, they would have been told that they would fail. But on the last time, when they did ask whether they would be successful, the Urim and Tummim agreed that they should go to battle and succeed, as it is stated, quote, and Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, shall I yet go out to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother, or shall I cease? And God said, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver him into your hands, unquote. What happened to the Urim and Tummim? Only priests could work the oracle. After King David's reign, the Urim no longer gave answers and were replaced by the prophets. The Bible says that difficult decisions will have to wait, quote, until a priest with Urim and Tummim should appear, unquote. The Talmud is more explicit, quote, from the time when the early prophet died, Urim and Tummim stopped giving answers. Rav Nachman said, in the days of David, sometimes an answer rose up and sometimes not. For example, Sadok, a high priest, asked and an answer rose up for him, whereas Abiatar, another high priest, asked and an answer did not rise up for him. The Talmud even says that King Ahasuerus, from the story of Purim, once wore the priestly vestments from the plundered first temple. Yale University uses the words Urim and Tummim for its logo, translating them as lux and veritas, light and truth. Why did God allow them in the first place, considering that the Torah bans divination? The Torah says, quote, you shall not practice divination or soothsaying, unquote. The Talmud elaborates. This refers, for example, to those who divine and receive guidance according to what happens to a weasel, to birds, or to fish, unquote. The Midrash gives other examples. But the Urim and Tummim are divination. Perhaps they were another one of God's temporary concessions to widely followed practices in biblical times. Without these concessions, the people would not have accepted the Torah. The pattern was, God allows it, but regulates it heavily, expecting the people to give it up on their own eventually. Shabbat Shalom.